To quote an outstanding singer, we're halfway there, we're looking good now, and nothing's going to get in the way. We're back with another division preview, and just like the song lyrics say, we're halfway there. This is OC and TJ, a.k.a. the Collin O'Callahan Show, a.k.a. the one where the short and talkative kid is the biggest football nerd on the planet. There we go. Let's jump right into this next AFC North preview. We did the NFC West, we did the AFC East, we did the NFC South, and we're doing the AFC North now. Pretty much, we're just alternating between different conferences until we run out of ideas before week one. So let me share the screen here, get through these stupid settings, and boom, there we go. Let's jump right into it. We got the two straight division-winning Baltimore Ravens. I think that's how you say it. Yep, the Baltimore Ravens, the reigning division champions. Some things change. Unfortunately, others stay the same because with all the pieces that they added, with the turnaround that they've had on their defense, with the outstanding season that Lamar Jackson had from September to December, it did not prevent the inevitable playoff defeat in the divisional round to the Buffalo Bills, one where they trailed as much as 21-3 or a 21-10, I should say, and then a near game-tying 2-point conversion fell right out of the hands of Mark Andrews. So it's a good thing they play each other week one because they definitely need some vindication here. But entering this season, you pretty much have the same expectations from them. You know they could be a title contender. You know that they have the pieces in place to knock down the Kansas City Chiefs or even the Buffalo Bills, but that's just a problem. They just never seem to do it. Lamar Jackson is 3-5 in the postseason. 3 of those losses were at home, and the other 2 were to Buffalo. So even though he's coming off an MVP caliber season, he didn't win it. Obviously, he lost it to Josh Allen. But if you look at the numbers, 41 touchdown passes, 4 interceptions, 915 rushing yards, 6.6 yards per carry. He led the league in passer rating this year. You think to yourself, how in the good world does he not have a Super Bowl ring yet? And quite frankly, we're still trying to wrap our brains around that. So every season moving forward until he finally delivers a championship is critical year for him because he's too talented and he's too great to just come up short time and time again. And I know it sounds redundant, but at the same time, like, this is what he did to himself. And this is this is the narrative that's surrounding him. And the only way to get rid of it is to actually go out there and win. Bottom line. Fortunately, he still has the king in the backfield, Derrick Henry, coming off a 1,900 rushing yard season. Tied the league in touchdowns with 16 and averaged nearly 6 yards a carry. So if anybody thought he was washed, that he didn't have it anymore, well, you were wrong because he just needed to be on a real team with a winning culture to finally, get back to, his true form. So the Baltimore Ravens, they were second in rush attempts. They were 31st in pass attempts, which is actually surprising considering that Baltimore has a lot of good receiving depth. You still got Todd Monken as the offensive coordinator. You know that him and Lamar Jackson are continuously working together to make sure that this offense gets better week after week after week, day after day. But the receiving core is incredibly legit. I mean, Dave Flowers is coming off his best season so far, cracked the 1,000-yard mark, nearly 80, had 74 catches with 4 touchdowns. Rashad Bateman set career highs in yards and touchdowns, got himself a pretty good contract extension as a result. You got an outstanding tight end duo of Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, but you can see the latter is going to miss some time due to an injury. And they also signed DeAndre Hopkins this past offseason to a minimum deal. Not the same player that he was in his prime, but he is definitely a good option that Lamar Jackson will definitely love to have, in his arsenal. As for the offensive line, I have no concerns about it whatsoever because they gave up the 3rd fewest sacks in the league this year or last year. The one difference is that no more Patrick McCarry. He's left in free agency. I think he signed with Jacksonville, if I'm not mistaken. But they were able to bring back Ronnie Stanley. He actually turned down more money from other teams just to stay with Baltimore. And everything else here pretty much stays the same. Andrew Voorhees, he's promoted to the starting left guard. You got Linderbaum, Daniel Falele, who's he's their biggest weak link because they think he's a pretty good lineman, but you definitely know that, most defenders are going to try to pick on him. And then you got Rosengard at right tackle. So offensively, you know that they're legit. You know that they're going to be, extremely efficient every single season. And a lot of times in their playoff losses, they've got it in their own way. And that's been a big reason why, they haven't, been able to get to the Super Bowl. So as long as they just stay composed and as they stay disciplined and as long as they, don't go one dimensional, one side or the other, then, I think I don't know who else can beat them besides Kansas City and Buffalo. So that's my only competition for them. Defensively, they started off horrendous. It looked like they were going to be one of the worst defenses in the league. Heck, some people thought that they were going to miss the playoffs entirely, and Pittsburgh was just going to steamroll their way to the division lead. But fortunately, they moved Kyle Hamilton back to deep safety. Everything shored up. Everything started to click. And, to Zach Orr's credit, they ended up being one of the best defenses in the league at the end of the year. They finished, ninth in points allowed, 10th in yards. They gave up the fewest rush yards and yards per carry, and they were second in sacks. So they were still just as explosive. They just needed some help in the secondary, and then boom, everything started to, figure itself out. One big reason why they had the best run defense in the league is because of their linebacking core. You got Roquan Smith coming off a first-team All-Pro season with 154 tackles, 1.5 sacks, an interception, or a forced fumble. There were some talk saying like he was coming off not so great of a season, but I'm thinking to myself, I don't know how you can make first-team All-Pro if, you put up these types of numbers. So I don't know which critics said that, but just a thought. And Trenton Simpson, really stepped into the Patrick Queen role, starting to show a lot of potential. He had 73 tackles. Hopefully, this is not I don't think this is going to be a huge problem whatsoever. If they were leading league in rushing this year and they were one of the top rushing defenses in the league the year before, this is going to be a consistent strength for this defense. And the pass rush, I think it's going to be just as great because you still have Nnamdi Madubuike, Cal Van Noy coming off an outstanding season. I mean, as a Patriots fan, I'm so happy that he, was able to maximize his potential. He had 12.5 sacks last year, which is, I think that's a career high. I don't think he had a season where he had higher than 12.5 sacks or even close to that. So tremendous credit to him because he is an outstanding player and he's still underappreciated to this day. I don't think people talk about him enough. The defensive line is still stacked. You got Travis Jones and Broderick Washington, Odafe Owe coming off a breakout season with 10 sacks. So the front seven has no room for error whatsoever. The secondary, I'm very interested to see because if you look at their pass defense last year, it was not great, especially through the first 8 weeks of the season. They finished 15th in rate. They gave up the second most passing yards, 21st in yards per attempt. They did finish 8th in completion percentage. I'll give you that. But that it had to take a position change just for them to, finally clean up their errors. But two guys you don't have to worry about is one, Kyle Hamilton, who I said moved back to his natural position at deep safety and was able to run the way he wanted to. Finished with an 82.9 rate, 8 passes defended, an interception, and 107 tackles, and still one of the best corners in the league in Marlon Humphrey. Finished with a 58.5 rate, 6 picks, and 15 passes defended. The fact that teams are actually targeting him is absolutely absurd because he showed you first and forehand that he still has a lot of juice left in him, and he is definitely one of the top 5 corners by far. And another guy that I think, Baltimore Ravens fans are excited to see them pair up with is Jair Alexander. So only played 7 games last year, so health is absolutely a critical factor to make sure that, he returns to at least 80% of what he was in Green Bay. But if everything goes in the right direction, this is going to be pretty scary, especially since, you got Nate Wiggins coming off a solid rookie season. You got Chidobe Awuzie as depth. Malachi Starks, they drafted with their first-round pick. I really liked him coming out of Georgia. That's someone that I think can pair up well with Kyle Hamilton. And, I'm really stoked to see this defense. Hopefully, they don't get off to the terrible start that they did the year before. But, I think this is my team to win the AFC North. And, listen, their ceiling is the Super Bowl. Okay, I think we're at the point where, it's not, they could go so far as the second round or the conference championship. No, they have the pieces to actually win a championship. They just have to go out there and get it done. Nobody's going to care how well you do in the regular season. We don't care if you go 15-2 or 16-1 or 13-4, whatever the record is. Win the freaking chip. You have too much talent. You've got a generational quarterback, the best running back, or one of the top two running backs in football, an offense full of playmakers, a lethal and elite defense, and like I said, it's put up or shut up. And one more thing, no more Justin Tucker. You got Tyler Loop, and apparently he's been balling out in the preseason. So I can't wait to see, how that special teams unit does, because it has never been a weakness whatsoever, especially since you have John Harbaugh as your head coach. For the Ravens, let's see. Obviously, I'm going to put them in the legit contenders category, but I honestly think they'll go 12-5, so I technically have to put them there. But I think, for the sake of this show, I'm just going to put them right here, because if the Bills are in it, then so do the Ravens. Anywhere between 12 and 13 wins. That's how I think the Ravens are going to do this season. So, all right. I realized I didn't even click the link on this, but we'll get to the Browns in just a second. Don't worry. We got plenty of time before we get to that team. Let's move on to the Pittsburgh Steelers and talk about their, mediocre franchise. I say mediocre because, they made the playoffs the last 2 years with a 10-7 record, but the last 3 times they made the playoffs, they've gotten absolutely demolished by real legit contenders. And to be quite honest, I know that they signed Aaron Rodgers, but I don't see this offense that much differently than I did last year with Russell Wilson. I know this is a group that's going to start off pretty strong early in the year, but I know it's the type of group that can dissipate when we get to the tougher months of December and January. So, Aaron Rodgers is not coming off a horrible season statistically. 28 touchdown passes and 11 interceptions. Those are pretty good numbers, but he only won 5 games with the Jets last year. It was that disappointment that got the head coach fired, that got the general manager fired, and now this is the last season of his career, at least according to him, because, he said on the Pat McAfee show that this is most likely going to be my final NFL season. It was either this team or I was going to retire. So hopefully he can finish the season strong by at least getting them past the first round. But as far as the Super Bowl contender, I'm not quite sure just yet, because if I look at the pieces on the offense, I think they got good pieces. I just want to see them reach their ceiling. Najee Harris is gone, which means Jaylen Warren is going to be the lead back. Has a lot of speed, has a lot of acceleration, definitely can show he's, capable of being a bruiser, but can catch passes out of the backfield. But at the same time, you have to really see a lot for him to prove that, he's a legit number 1 back. Maybe that could go to Caleb Johnson, who they drafted in the 3rd round. So I think that it's a decent pairing. It's not great, but I think the more reps we see these two take together, the better of an evaluation that we'll have as the regular season, gets underway. No more George Pickens. They traded him to the Dallas Cowboys. So the consolation prize is DK Metcalf, who's coming up a pretty strong season, 992 receiving yards, 5 touchdowns. But there are times where, he's had up and down performances. And you really need to, I really need more of a bigger sample size, at least in Pittsburgh, to show that, okay, he's going to be the number 1 focal point of this passing attack. It's going to be that way as what it seems. In Seattle, he ended up losing his starting spot, or ended up losing, a lot of his production and a lot of his targets to Jackson Smith and Jigba, who had an outstanding season himself. And, the same thing happened for Tyler Lockett. So maybe in a new change of scenery, that'll definitely help him. I'm hoping that he has a good season. As for the rest of the wide receivers, Roman Wilson, finally going to have a fully healthy season, entering his second year. The second-year guy out of Michigan. Signed Robert Woods. You got Calvin Austin, who set career highs in catches, yards, and touchdowns. You got a pretty solid tight end duo of Jonnu Smith and Pat Freiermuth. But the offensive line, I don't really know how to get a gauge on them. They're okay, but they're not great. They let Dan Moore Jr. walk, who honestly signed a boatload of money for the Tennessee Titans. In my opinion, it was too much money just because he gave up so many sacks last year. But you've got Broderick Jones and Troy Fautanu at their tackle positions. Broderick Jones moving to his natural position at left. Fautanu will shift over to the right. And in the interior, it's pretty good. You got Sam Malu, Zach Frazier, Mason McCormick, but I think, with Aaron Rodgers, who's still trying to recover from that torn Achilles and is not getting any younger, I think he's going to be 41 in December this season. So offensively, you present a lot of challenges, especially when you've got Arthur Smith as your offensive coordinator, who's not going to pass it more times than he's gonna run it. Last year, they were like fourth in rush attempts, and in pass attempts, they were 29th. So I'm interested to see how Rodgers and Smith are going to mesh together, or if it's going to mesh at all. So defensively, their biggest win was obviously bringing back TJ Watt, 3-year, $123 million contract extension, which is such a relief because I don't think anybody wanted to see the face of their franchise go somewhere else or hold out potentially in the regular season. But I don't think they could say the same thing for Cam Hayward because he's coming off an outstanding season, 8 sacks, 11 passes defended, first team all pro. And he's holding it because he wants more guarantees, throughout the regular season. He wants a bigger pay raise. He wants a new contract. So hopefully they get something figured out soon. But they also drafted Derrick Henry in the first round for a reason because they know that when he decides to hang it up, which honestly we don't know when that's going to be, Derrick Henry is going to step in and, be that future replacement. You know, I think, their pass rush has always been the trademark of this organization, and it's not going to change anytime soon. But this year or last season, they were pretty subpar. I mean, they were 16th in sacks and pressure percentage. And this is with Alex Highsmith and Keanu Bennett and TJ Watt and Hayward and even Nick Herbig to some degree. So hopefully they really boost and elevate their games because obviously they know every single year they're going to be the ones that is going to be under the microscope as long as Mike Tomlin is still their head coach. The rush defense was definitely a strength for most of the year. They were fourth in yards per carry and sixth in yards per game. Patrick Queen's coming off a pretty solid season. Peyton Wilson did so well in his rookie year. I think he did pretty well in his rookie year, I should say. Cole Holcomb is a good depth piece. So I think their front seven is pretty solid. I think the secondary is going to be extremely fun to watch because you got Jalen Ramsey paired with Joey Porter Jr., you got Darius Slay, Deshaun Elliott, Juan Thornhill, Beanie Bishop, even Chuck Clark. Chuck Clark is a depth piece on the Steelers secondary. So, in my opinion, they're going to win at least 9 games just because Mike Tomlin is going to refuse to have a losing season. But at the same time, I don't know if signing Aaron Rodgers is really going to move the needle unless everybody turns the clock back and, plays like they did in their prime and just, unleash hell on the rest of the National Football League. Then I think they're just going to have a pretty good season. They'll probably back their way into the playoffs because another team collapsed, but they'll probably get smoked by a real team like the Chiefs or the Bills or the Ravens or whoever the heck else decides to, have a strong season. So I think for the Pittsburgh Steelers, going to put them in the just okay category as a result. So who knows if Renegade is even going to save them from getting into a lower tier. Okie dokie. Let's move on to the jungle where we talk about the Cincinnati Bengals. Hoo-day, hoo-day. It's actually really startling that this team somehow missed the playoffs last season because let me put this in proper perspective. Joe Burrow led the league in touchdown passes. Lamar Chase won the Triple Crown. Trey Hendrickson led the league in sacks. And you missed the playoffs because you have a disastrous defense and your offense, turned the ball over at the worst times in a few winnable games this season. So, terrible defense plus costly mistakes on offense equals recipe for disaster. Offensively, I don't think there's anything to worry about too much. You still got Joe Burrow. You got the best wide receiver combo in Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Chase Brown's coming off a breakout year. Yoshi Voss is, one of the best third options in the league. Mike Gesicki brought back, really thrived in his role at tight end. The offensive line, though, is always going to be my room of concern because it is always, since Joe Burrow has arrived, it has been the one thing that people are like, I hope to God that this O-line doesn't come back to bite us in the butt. And guess what had happened? In the Super Bowl against the Rams, in the conference championship the following season against the Chiefs, that O-line imploded at the worst possible time, and it was one of the big reasons why they have still yet to win a championship. The tackle positions are solid, in my opinion. You got Orlando Brown Jr. on the blind side, and Marius Mims. really starting to, develop into his role, former first-round pick out of Georgia. But the interior looks so concerning. I mean, you got Ted Karras, who's a decent center, not great, but the guard positions are they're just bad. And there's no depth whatsoever. Lucas Patrick and Dylan Fairchild. That is a serious problem if you're counting on them to be your starting caliber guards. And if Cordell Bolson and Cody Ford are your backups, then that's not considered to be huge upgrades either. So, but it's not as bad as the defense. And forget about the numbers. Forget about the statistics. Trey Hendrickson is still not on a new contract. He was quite possibly the only reason why that defense was even relevant because he led the league in sacks with 17 and a half. And just to put this in proper perspective, the Cincinnati Bengals only had about 37 sacks last season. So if it wasn't for Hendrickson, they would have been one of the weakest defensive lines in football. Fortunately, they were able to get Shamar Stewart, their first-round pick out of A&M, to sign his rookie deal, which was one of the longest rookie holdouts ever because they decided to lowball him. But fortunately, they were able to come to some sort of resolution. But even with those two, you just wonder who could step up because Sam Hubbard retired. And if I look at the rest of it doesn't really have a whole lot of depth. I mean, Miles Murphy hasn't really shown enough. B.J. Hill's not getting any younger. Joseph Osai, he's coming off a pretty decent season. Had, 5-6 sacks last season? So, it's like, if you can't count on, if these two are getting held up, who's going to be next in line? Maybe Chris Jenkins Jr.? I don't know. That's the issue. And that was one of the biggest reasons why I say Hendrickson was one of the biggest reasons, if not the biggest reason, why that defense even had a pulse. The run defense wasn't too much of a weakness. They were 12th in yards per carry and 19th in yards per game, but they definitely made some changes as well. They released Jermaine Pratt. They also let Akeem Davis-Gaither walk in free agency. So pairing up with Logan Wilson is going to be Oren Burks, who's coming up 2 strong seasons with the 49ers and the Philadelphia Eagles. Won a ring last season and definitely has proven to be a quality rotational piece. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. And they also drafted Demetrius Knight Jr. as a mid-round pick. So there's definitely some depth here, but the secondary is what I'm really concerned about. Cam Taylor-Britt is supposed to be their best corner, yet he gave up 102.7 passer rating and 6 touchdowns. And it was a complete drop-off from the year before where he had a pretty solid season. And even Geno Smith, who I think led the team in interceptions, also gave it a rate of over 100. So your 2 best defenders have given up higher passer ratings, and you're really counting on your younger guys to really step up. I mean, Dax Hill only played in 5 games, but you also have DJ Turner and Jordan Battle and Josh Noonan. But have they really proven enough to be the guy or the one that's going to, save this secondary from, an abject mess? Lou Anarumo, he's gone. He's now in Indianapolis. They fired him at the end of the season. The Cincinnati Bengals did. So Al Golden, who was just with Notre Dame last year, he's going to have his work cut out for him because let me tell you, you're actually playing in a conference this time and in a division that is one of the most competitive in the league. So you're going to have your work cut out for you to start the year. And to be quite honest, that's why I don't really think the Bengals are going to make the playoffs again because if you just keep doing the same things over and over and expecting a different result, players get tired, they get worn down, and you lose your voice in the locker room. And that is why I think Zach Taylor should be on the hot seat. Because if they start off 0-1 again, then it will just show that they have learned absolutely nothing. Do you realize that they've lost the first game of the year 5 times in the 6 years that Joe Burrow has been in the NFL? When they lost the first game, they've also lost the second one. The last thing that the Bengals could do is not only start off 0-1, but they can't be 0-2 again because they just keep getting into a big hole, and it takes a miracle for them to even, have a winning season. So that's why I'm just really frustrated with this football team because you've got that great offense. You've got, the league leader in sacks on defense, along with a few key pieces, yet all you get is 2 straight years of having a winning season, but not even making the playoffs and, suffering heartbreak after heartbreak. Who wants to see that year after year? It's too frustrating. So I'll just put put the Bengals in the just okay category. I'll say they have a better record than the Steelers just because I have more faith in Joe Burrow than I do Aaron Rodgers. But uh, honestly, I don't see a huge drop off or a huge gap between these two teams. I do, however, see one, between these two teams and the Cleveland Browns. Because anything negative I have to say about them probably wouldn't be enough to suffice. And there's one big reason why. This position. Who the hell is going to be the starting quarterback? Because Joe Flacco is going to be 40 years old. Actually, he is 40 years old. Scratch that. He already is. Coming off a pretty okay season with the Colts, 12 touchdowns, 7 picks. Heck, he did better than Anthony Richardson. That's not saying much, but hey, you get style points for that. And to be quite honest, it says a lot when Joe Flacco is one of the best quarterbacks the Browns have had in over a decade because he was actually one of the key pieces that got them to the playoffs just a couple years ago. But if it's not Joe Flacco, then it's going to be Kenny Pickett, who's on his third team in 4 years and has put up mediocre stats at best. 15 touchdowns, 14 picks, 79.3 passer rating. Do you really think that he's going to be the guy that's going to put this team on the map? Or back on the map, I should say. You got 2 rookies in Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. One is going to miss time due to an oblique injury, and the other is just coming back from a hamstring. So you don't really know what you have in either of them against, legitimate competition. I know Shedeur played well last week in the Carolina Panthers game, but that was against backups and against third stringers. So I'm not going to put too much stock into one preseason game like Nike did by making that freaking premature ad. And one more quarterback that they added, Pro Bowler Tyler Huntley. What an inspiring quarterback room. And you better figure out who the hell's going to be your starter this year because last season that offense was a joke. They were dead last in passer rating, yards per attempt, points scored, and third down, and they turned the ball over the second most times. Their offensive line gave up the second most sacks in all of football. And when I look at the offense this season, I only see 2 good pieces. You got Jerry Jeudy, who is coming off a breakout season, but even then you wonder if that was just a 1-year blimp. And then you got David Njoku, who only played 11 games last season. They drafted 2 running backs, Quinshon Judkins, Dylan Sampson. Jerome Ford, coming off an okay season, had a lot of yards per carry, but only, 556 yards in 14 games played. So don't really know if that inspires too much confidence. I know the O-line was a joke, but 556 yards in 14 games is what the numbers say. The receiving depth is very questionable because Deontay Johnson is coming off an abysmal season in which he started with Carolina, then didn't really get, the amount of reps that he should have gotten. Then he goes to Baltimore, in which he pretty much gets doghoused and then pretty much just walked out on the team. And the other 2 guys you have in place are Cedric Tillman and Jamari Thrash. Okay players, but you haven't seen enough from them to, say to yourself, yeah, I'm really counting on these 2 guys to really elevate this offense. And I already talked about the O-line. They let Jedrick Willis go, not that huge of a loss. And the shocking part is, these guys were like Pro Bowl, All-Pro caliber players just a few years ago. You still got Bitonio and Conklin and Teller, but the problem is it was health. They couldn't protect the quarterback, and more importantly, they didn't have anybody that inspired true confidence. And honestly, I don't think you could say too much different about the defense because even though it's got Myles Garrett, next to nothing else besides maybe Denzel Ward. Myles Garrett, thank God, he's still in the dog pound. After demanding a trade in the offseason, he was able to get a huge contract extension, 4 years, $160 million. He said the trade request wasn't about money, yet apparently, the Browns were able to throw everything they got just to make sure he didn't go anywhere. So, give a golf clap to them, but I don't really know if that really does anything because Myles Garrett is not getting any younger, A. B, he's playing an extremely physical position. And number C, that was the least of that should have been the least of their issues, was making sure that Myles Garrett stayed in Cleveland. When you look at the rest of the defense, honestly, I don't know what to expect because they drafted Mason Graham with the 5th overall pick. You know that he's going to make an immediate impact because the rest of their D-line has just a bunch of average starters and rotational pieces. I mean, Shelby Harris, a good run stuffer at one but not really so much anymore. Joe Tryon Shoinka, there's a reason why Tampa Bay left because he really couldn't live up to his first round pedigree. Alex Wright, haven't seen a whole lot from him either. Malik Collins, he's a pretty good defensive tackle, but not great. And yeah, that's what I said. That's like I said, it's Myles Garrett or bust when it comes to this pass rush. I mean, I know that they were what third in pressure percentage, but again, a lot of that had to do with Myles Garrett. Actually, no, they led the league in pressure percentage. So you can take number 95 for that after coming off a 14-sack season. The run defense is going to take a massive hit this year because, as you can see, their starting linebacker, Jeremiah Wusu-Koromoa, a.k.a. JOK, is going to be out for the year with a season-ending neck injury. So Carson Schlesinger, who they drafted in the second round, he's definitely going to get the green dot pretty early. Or maybe it's, Mohamed Diabate, who is, definitely been one of their more promising developed players. They also signed Jerome Baker. They also signed Devin Bush as additional veteran depth pieces, but, they haven't really been the same in quite a while. So not expecting that those two are going to put up elite numbers. As for the secondary, you got Denzel Ward still. You got Grant Telpin, but Denzel Ward is coming off a pretty subpar season by his standards, a 99.5 passer rating. He led the league in passes defended with 19. So there was a little bit of a drop-off in the fear factor. Grant Delpit had over 100 tackles, but when you look at his pass coverage numbers, 4 touchdowns allowed and a near 141 passer rating. So there is definitely a lot to clean up there as well. Greg Newsome, same thing, 111 rate passer rating last year. It was actually really shocking that they even took a dip in production, considering how outstanding they were just a couple seasons ago. Last year, they were 27th in passer rating, 25th in yards per attempt, 12th in yards per game, and the only silver lining was that they were third in completion percentage. So I hate to say this, Cleveland, but yeah, you're going to be in the number 1 pick contention. I think you'll have a better record than the Saints because, again, you've got Myles Garrett and you've got Denzel Ward and you got decent pieces. It's just, who's your quarterback? Who the hell is your QB? And the minute that gets figured out, or the minute that they show that they have promise, then it's going to be another wasteful and pathetic and frustrating season for you. And I hate saying this because I just want this team to be good for longer than a season, but that's just the position that they're in right now. And for Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry, the clock is ticking because you put yourselves into this situation by giving Deshaun Watson that horrible contract in the first place. And it's absolutely sweet karma that this is happening to them because not only has it absolutely blown up in their faces, but look at Baker Mayfield in Tampa Bay. Mic drop. All right. That wraps up our 4th division preview so far. We have 4 more to go. Let's see who we will get to preview tomorrow afternoon. Wow, that actually stopped longer than I thought. All right, so we are getting the AFC South, the most intriguing division of all. I'm being sarcastic, of course, because dear God, it's an absolute joke. Besides the Houston Texans, you got 3 teams that not only missed the playoffs, but are not expected to be any good in 2025. But who knows? Maybe one of these teams will surprise all of us and have a good season. My bet is going to be on the Tennessee Titans just because of Cam Ward alone. But thank you all so much for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe for additional content. It's Saturday, so that means the second week of the preseason is going to be underway in just about 10 minutes. So enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I'll see you tomorrow with the AFC South preview.